Hello, everyone. What a pleasure it is to speak to you today. Thank you for the kind invitation. The title of my presentation is Interoperability, Laboratory Data, and Real-World Evidence. Where are we? Let's see, I'm going to try to advance my slides now. This presentation is dedicated to Dr. Mike Waters, who we lost as a victim of the pandemic, very sadly. He was the founder of SHIELD, which is a large public-private partnership I'm going to talk about, the semantic harmonization of interoperable enhancements for laboratory data. The mantra or the motto that guides SHIELD is that we need simply to describe the same test the same way every time. And you as a group of ontologists, of course, understand that very well. As an overview for my presentation, I'm going to start with some level setting. I know this is a rather sophisticated group, but I think just a brief review of some fundamental principles is probably a good way to start. I'm then going to talk about the critical need for interoperable laboratory data and why I'm focusing on laboratory. Interoperability is a big topic by itself, but laboratory is an important place that we might think about starting our efforts. I'm going to say a little bit about why we still have messy data in the laboratory space, talk about SHIELD, the public-private partnership that has developed a consensus towards a harmonization of coding, talk about how SHIELD has been promoted or propelled by the pandemic, and then some future directions. I'll start with a reflection on where we're at. There's a vision for digital health, but it sometimes seems like a vacant promise because we're not there yet. We've been talking about the wealth of health data in electronic records, the mobile apps, the low cost of gene sequencing, wearable devices that could be unlocked by artificial intelligence and cloud computing and blockchain to promote public health. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. We're not even close because we don't have the plug-and-play environment that has made possible international banking on your cell phone, the Internet of Things, and shopping on the Internet. There's a number of statements that lead us to this frustrating conclusion. I put a citation. All the citations are live in the slides, and I think probably you'll be shared the slides after the presentation, so you can go to some of these original sources if they're useful to you. Interoperability as a level setter needs to be understood in its three components, or three types of interoperability. There's syntactic, which is the format and structure of storage and transportation, and you all are, I'm sure, working on or certainly aware of FHIR. And of course, public health has been trading information or sharing information for a long time, but FHIR is certainly a more sophisticated way to do some stuff we've been doing. Second is semantic interoperability, which depends on a common language that's understandable to both machines and humans. This is the world of coding and ontology. And finally, organizational interoperability. And this probably is the biggest challenge. And healthcare data is on a continuum from easy to create interoperability in these three categories to very difficult. And what I'm going to say about lab data is that it's a good place to start because, first of all, it's been digitalized for decades. Lab data has been available in digital form, electronic digital form, not just something you could write down, but electronic digital form, at least for 40 years. Also, laboratory values are comparable from lab to lab because of federal legislation starting in 1988 that regulates medical laboratories, the CLIA legislation, and there are reference labs around the country that, if you want to be certified, you have to agree with a reference lab. So the actual base information that we're collecting is of very high quality and comparable. We also have standards for coding. We've got LOINC, we've got SNOMED, we've got many coding systems. One of the typical critique of coding is, coding's great, we've got so many. The issue is that laboratory data in health systems is not used in a consistent way. Every lab uses the coding systems that we've got idiosyncratically. So the next step is to try to figure out, and this is SHIELD's motto, how to get everyone to use the same coding, a harmonized approach to coding. The College of the American Pathologists have been well aware and working on this problem for a long time. The pathologists are the physician group that oversee laboratories in our health system, and they've set out in I think a very practical and excellent paper, readable to the non-medical technical person, the common problems with laboratory that leads to interoperability. They call it the 10 mistakes. Again, an excellent paper worth looking at. The end result of this is that it decreases the quality of care and costs money, and it also takes time. We've seen very painfully the lack of quality, the problems with the quality of data during the pandemic, where we'd like high-quality data like immediately, and it's just not, it takes really months, sometimes over a year to get this data in a form that we can really interpret and understand and act on. SHIELD, as I said, was created as a public-private partnership, and it involves over 70 organizations that are both the users and the producers of this data. All the partners, so we've got federal agencies, all the federal agencies, ONC, we've got the payers, we've got the manufacturers. A lot of some of the information that we need comes directly electronically out of some of these machines. EHR vendors, other laboratories, standard developers. There are other public-private partnerships and academia working around these spaces. So it's a very comprehensive approach that looks for, and I'll say this term again, looks for a sweet spot that all of the users and producers can agree upon and produce an authoritative coding source. So there is a website devoted to SHIELD. The link here is at the top. This is the MDFENet website. That site is live, and you can go there if you want to learn more about the details of SHIELD. As I said, the SHIELD is to capture the entire process. And here's the process of, in this case, COVID test data, the COVID test that many of you have been getting, where they put the swab up your nose, and then it's transported, it's prepared. And then for the coding, there's a question and an answer. So one question can be, does the nasopharyngeal swab contain SARS-CoV-2 RNA by PCR? That's a lot of information, and it's rendered in two pieces. First of all, the type of data performed, the type of test performed, that's the PCR test for SARS-CoV-2 RNA, and that's rendered in a LOINC code. But then there's a specimen. It's a nasopharyngeal, so that's got to be coded, and that's a SNOMED code. Then the answer is provided. That is the answer to the question: does the nasopharyngeal swab contain the virus RNA? And it's a SNOMED code in this case: yes and no, detected and undetected. And again, the problem has been historically that at each level, sometimes these codes, there are other codes that can give you, that could be used to answer the same question. We just have to decide which way to do it. It's kind of like the word beat. Is it spelled B-E-A-T or B-E-E-T? And what are we talking about? A verb to beat something or a red vegetable? It's as you know, sometimes it's that simple. It's a spelling question. Now, as I said, the SHIELD provides an authoritative source for harmonizing this code, that by getting all the stakeholders together, we can decide which LOINC code to use, which STOMED code to use, and very importantly, how to identify the particular test. In the device space, we have something called the Unique Device Identifier, the UDI, but that's just the machine. In some cases, in complex laboratory settings, you need reagents and you need information about the reagents, lot numbers, and these sorts of things. So all of that has to be very carefully adjudicated and coded, and again, in a similar way across different labs. All of this then goes into what's called the LIVID file. That's the LOINC in vitro diagnostic. And this is a file that's, here's an example of a file. It's a flat file that's developed by the consortium, by SHIELD, and vetted by federal agents, and then put up on the CDC website as a reference guide for proper coding. The LIVID file is a live document, actually, because the new tests are being developed, and as we go, we're also learning more about this whole process. So this is very much of a live activity that we're participating in. The really important underpinning for this was the CARES Act, which was the early, back in March, congressional response to the coronavirus pandemic. And the CARES Act required that every lab that performs and analyzes, I'm reading here from the legislation, a test that is intended to detect SARS-CoV-2 or diagnose possible case of COVID-19 to report the results of each test to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And that statute also specified that the Secretary, it ordered the Secretary to prescribe the form, the manner, the timing, the frequency of the testing. So this is what gave the Secretary the authority and requirement to figure out this coding problem, and SHIELD was adopted by the Secretary at that time. An August 1st date was put in place for the beginning of the system. As you can imagine, with thousands of labs across the United States, this is not an easy thing, asking everybody who's been coding things idiosyncratically for so long to now all of a sudden find the LIVID file and use it. But this is what's underway. I'm not going to talk about that today, but there's some links here that give you some details about that process. Again, this is a historic moment for public health because we haven't had this kind of government support for interoperability. And I think you all, those of you working in ontology, all understand the significance of this moment. And I think it's important to note the process as the right one. This was not a government top-down approach to, well, we'll figure out the codes and let you know. It was really a bottom-up. We worked with all the stakeholders through SHIELD to figure out what's the best way to do this, and now the government is now adopting, that should be an O, the system as set out in SHIELD. It's my humble opinion that this is a major step, and we're hoping that this sort of support for interoperability can continue and perhaps in the short term be expanded to include other codes, other lab codes. I'm going to put this whole issue of interoperability in a broader context that has been set out by Logica Health. If you haven't looked at the Logica Health work, I really strongly recommend that you do. The goal of Logica Health, and this is another big public-private partnership, is to create a plug-and-play environment, understanding the multiple producers and users of the data and the need to address them all on a very complex set of tasks. Logica Health has built on the ONC standards and interoperability framework and created a transition map and a process to engage partners. And SHIELD has been part of that effort. So I recommend that you take a look at Logica as you think about your own efforts to move towards interoperability. The bigger issue beyond Logica is we don't have an FCC, Federal Communications Commission, to really guide the development of the health IT system. The internet and the commerce on the internet and telephone and banking, all that, has been highly regulated by the FCC through standards, and it's resulted in billions and billions of dollars of industry that would not be there if we didn't have those standards. So I see this as a kind of a structural issue that we're facing in health. ONC is a great organization. They just don't have the money or the authority to do what we're talking about here. I'm going to end with a reflection on what we talked about today from sociology and economics. Complex economic systems are succeeding through strategically coordinated networks. Economies in advanced areas like IT, Silicon Valley, require a very different approach to competition and collaboration, a very different role of the government. And this has been set out in a really interesting book called Knowledge Evolution and Societal Transformation by Gerald Haig, one of our own local sociologists at the University of Maryland here in Washington, although he's an international figure. It's an amazing guy. Anyway, this book kind of sets out the imperative to solve complex questions, we need these public-private partnerships, these strategically coordinated networks, as the literature calls it in economics, to go forward. So in closing, I'll summarize making 3 points that we need to move beyond standards to interoperability for harmonization of coding. This is a problem in all of our areas of healthcare, that we've got multiple coding systems, and we've got to figure out how to decide how to get the specific job done. We also need to work within ecosystems and find that sweet spot, the place where value for all the stakeholders is met. And finally, never waste a good emergency. Emergencies make possible a whole host of things that in normal times we don't see go forward. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and looking forward for our discussion.